People would talk about it for weeks. 14 seconds. That's all it took. The reigning champion of Hawthorne Jiu-Jitsu, 30 wins, undefeated, known for flattening out-of-towners and ragdolling visiting belts, was dismantled by a woman nobody had seen before. No flair, no branded rash guard, just quiet steps onto the mat and a gaze that didn't flinch. She tapped him in under 15 seconds and walked off the mat like she'd done nothing remarkable at all. But the story didn't begin with glory. 3 days earlier, Maya Cross sat inside her aging Civic parked outside the strip mall. Her engine clicked as it cooled. She stared at the gym across the lot, where a faded sign read, Hawthorne BJJ, discipline above all. The sun had dipped low, painting the asphalt in gold and shadow. Cars came and went. Big guys in flip-flops and G-bags walked in laughing, swearing, slapping each other's backs. She didn't belong here. She didn't care. She sat in stillness for a while, then turned off the engine and stepped out. Her gray sweatpants and black hoodie made her nearly invisible. She moved like she didn't want attention, but still had the presence of someone who could take it, if she chose. Inside, the gym was loud and humid. A mix of mat sweat, disinfectant, and testosterone filled the air. At the front desk sat a young man, early 20s, buzz cut, phone in hand, name tag crooked. He glanced up when she stood in front of him and gave a brief smirk. "You training?" he asked. She nodded. "Waivers on the clipboard. First class is free. After that, you pay." He didn't ask her name. He didn't need to. She wasn't supposed to matter. She filled out the form, left emergency contact blank, and handed it back. Then she stepped into the mat space. About 20 guys in various belt colors, blue, white, and a few purples, were warming up. Most were already paired off. When she walked in, the chatter dipped. One guy snorted. Another nudged his partner and laughed. She didn't react. She stood quietly by the wall and waited. Coach Dominic Hawthorne emerged a few minutes later. Mid-50s, built like a tree stump, and with the kind of black belt that had more tape than fabric. He scanned the room, then stopped on her. "You trained before?" he asked. "Some," she replied. That was enough for him to categorize her. Nothing else needed saying. He barked out instructions, and the class began. Warm-ups were basic: forward rolls, shrimping, technical stand-ups. Maya followed every movement with controlled precision. No wasted motion, no signs of confusion. Her body remembered what others tried to memorize, but nobody noticed, or they pretended not to. When it came time to drill guard passing, no one volunteered to partner with her. Coach snapped his fingers at the desk kid. "Trevor, pair up." Trevor sighed and flopped onto the mat in front of her like he'd been forced to babysit. He barely explained the drill, just grabbed her arms, shoved her legs aside, and dropped into position like it was a formality. She let him. Then it was her turn. She passed his guard cleanly. Textbook grips, perfect pressure, no brute strength. Trevor blinked. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. The drills grew harder. A brown belt named Rocco used too much force during takedowns, slammed his weight on her shoulders, whispered jokes to nearby students as he reset. Maya absorbed it all without complaint. She was mapping their rhythms, measuring where their strength ended and their sloppiness began. Halfway through class, the gym's golden boy arrived. Logan Price. Tall, lean, smug. His entrance changed the room instantly. Guys straightened their posture. The air shifted. He scanned the mat, spotted Maya, and grinned like he'd found something hilarious. "New blood?" he asked Coach, nodding in her direction. "She says she's trained a little," Coach replied. Logan winked. "Hope she lasts longer than last week's guy." The final drill was King of the Hill. One grappler stays on the mat until submitted. The line formed. Names were called. Bodies moved, taps came. When Coach pointed at Maya, the room hummed with expectation. She stepped forward. Logan cracked his neck and waited in the center. They bumped fists. He lunged, strong, fast, overconfident. She sprawled, shifted her hips, threaded her leg across his shoulder, and locked the triangle tight. His face turned red in an instant. He tapped hard. 14 seconds. The gym went dead quiet. For a moment after Logan tapped, the silence felt cavernous. The kind that empties a room even when it's full. Around the mat, people stood frozen, hands still half raised, jaws tilted mid-smirk. No one knew how to react. Coach Hawthorne blinked twice, his eyes narrowing as if the outcome were somehow still undecided, as if he might rewind the tape in his mind and find an error that made it all go differently. Logan sat up, gasping, face flushed with disbelief. He didn't look at her. He looked through her, like someone waking up from anesthesia and realizing the pain hadn't been a dream. Maya stood motionless in the center of the mat, her breathing steady, no sweat breaking on her brow. It wasn't triumph she wore. It wasn't smugness. It was stillness. Total, unshakable stillness. The kind of calm that only came from surviving storms others hadn't walked away from. No one cheered. No one clapped. Coach cleared his throat and forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. All right, reset. Just a fluke. Good effort from both. Let's finish up with stretching. His voice sounded lighter than usual, falsely casual, and everyone knew it. Maya didn't linger. She picked up her hoodie and walked off the mat without fanfare. The locker room was cramped and fluorescent lit, lined with half-broken lockers and a single rust-stained bench. She rinsed off, dressed, and stepped outside within minutes, wanting no part of the questions forming behind the eyes she'd seen. But she felt them. The stares from the hallway, the careful hush that followed her down the corridor. She'd been invisible when she walked in. Now, she was something else entirely. Not respected. Not yet. Just watched. Outside, the sun had vanished, and the parking lot glowed in the haze of overhead floodlights. She sat in her car, but didn't start the engine. Instead, she pulled a small case from under the passenger seat and opened it. Inside lay a worn military patch and an ID badge she hadn't touched in years. Not fake, not expired, just retired. Officially, Maya Cross was no one. Unofficially, she had once been someone people whispered about. Her name wasn't Maya back then. It was a call sign, Spectre. She ran her thumb across the edge of the patch. Black cloth, gray embroidery, no unit listed, no affiliation. That was the point. Spectre had never been a soldier. She'd been a tool sharpened by a program that didn't officially exist, one designed to produce field operatives capable of disappearing in plain sight and ending conflicts before they ever reached headlines. Ghost tactics, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no history. She'd walked away from all of it. Or so she thought. The following day at the gym, everything felt slightly off. Not overt, just small things. Trevor avoided eye contact. Rocco didn't show. Two of the blue belts whispered near the lockers, then abruptly went silent when she entered. Coach greeted her with a nod that was more performance than politeness. Logan wasn't there. Neither were the jokes. Class proceeded normally on the surface. Drills, rotations, positional sparring. But Maya noticed the shift in energy, how partners moved with extra force, how certain grips lingered longer than necessary. It was testing disguised as training. She adapted, defended, matched pace without ever escalating. They were still trying to figure her out, still hoping to find the gap that explained what had happened the day before. Halfway through class, as Coach circled the mat correcting form, Maya heard her name mentioned quietly behind her. She didn't turn around, but her ears caught it. "She's not just some hobbyist. Did you see the setup on that choke? That's black belt stuff." The response was quieter but clipped. "Doesn't matter. Logan's not gonna let that slide." Later, as she changed in the women's locker room, emptier than usual, a knock came on the door. It opened before she could answer. A girl in a blue jai stepped inside, younger, red-haired, eyes sharp beneath a polite expression. She introduced herself as Riley, one of Coach's assistant instructors. Said nothing for a moment after that. Just stood near the lockers as if she'd forgotten what she came in for. Then she placed a folded piece of paper on the bench and said, "Some of us roll early. Before the crowds. It's quieter." Maya didn't look up. She waited until the door closed again, then unfolded the note. "Open mat, 6:30 a.m. No coach, no Logan, just training." It was handwritten. No name. But the gesture was clear. Not everyone in this place was hostile. Some had just been waiting for someone to stand still long enough to show them how to fight differently. That night, Maya returned to her apartment, a one-bedroom walk-up with sparse furniture and blackout curtains. She locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and sat cross-legged on the living room floor. She pulled the military ID from her case again, placed it beside an old photo of two people in desert gear, arms slung around each other's shoulders. Both wore the same unit patch, same eyes, same smirk. One was her, the other was her brother. Officially, he was dead. But the last mission hadn't gone as cleanly as the reports claimed. And now, someone clearly knew where to find her. The gym was dim and near silent when Maya arrived just after dawn. The hum of the fluorescent lights hadn't fully filled the space yet, and the air still held the scent of cleaning chemicals, not sweat. A few bodies moved quietly along the mats, no banter, no booming voices, just disciplined repetition. This was not the crowd that came to perform. These were the ones who came to get better. She slipped off her shoes, stepped onto the edge of the mat, and began to stretch in silence. Across from her, Riley, the red-haired assistant instructor, nodded once but said nothing. A few other early risers glanced in her direction, eyes curious but no longer mocking. One even offered a quiet gesture, an unspoken invitation to drill. For the first time since she'd walked into Hawthorne Jiu-Jitsu, the air felt clean. They trained in loops. Maya worked through sweeps, guard passes, transitions, letting her body move freely without needing to restrain its efficiency. She let herself flow for the first time since she'd stepped into the gym. No audience, no proving ground, just movement. The young man she drilled with, a solid blue belt, paused at one point, sitting back on his heels. "Where'd you learn that grip?" he asked, not suspicious, just surprised. "You don't see that until, like, national comps." Maya wiped sweat from her temple with her sleeve and shrugged. "Picked it up somewhere." He nodded, accepting that, then added, "Wherever that was, they taught it right." She didn't respond. Praise was a language she'd never learned to trust. After the session, as she was gathering her gear, Riley approached and stood beside her without speaking. For a while, they both watched the last pair of students finish a spar. Riley finally asked, her voice low, "You're not really new, are you?" Maya gave a small smile, not denying it. "You don't flinch," Riley added, "even when someone tries to crank something dangerous. That's not casual toughness. That's practiced calm." Maya said nothing, but something in her silence confirmed it. Riley didn't press further. Later that morning, after a shower and a walk through town, Maya returned to her apartment to find a manila envelope slid under her door. There was no label, no postage, just her name, handwritten in small block letters. She locked the door behind her, scanned the windows, then opened it with steady hands. Inside was a single photograph. It was grainy, black and white, taken at a distance. A man in civilian clothes was walking through what looked like an outdoor market in a desert town. His posture was hunched slightly, his beard longer, but the face, though older and weathered, was unmistakable. It was her brother. The timestamp on the image read July 2018, 7 months after his supposed death. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breath didn't quicken. But something inside her shifted. Something old and buried began to surface. She set the photo down, went to her closet, and pulled out the case she hadn't opened in nearly 2 years. Inside were the fragments of a life she had burned away. The field notebooks, the encrypted USB, the belt with the barely visible unit tag. She retrieved one item, a hardened drive, and inserted it into her laptop. The screen lit up with an old interface she hadn't seen since the debrief room in Riyadh. There was only one item saved inside, a classified list of internal mission call signs from Project Emberlight, the Black Ops unit they'd both served under. Her brother's call sign had been Nomad. Hers had been Spectre. The last status update for Nomad had listed him as KIA, not recovered. Now, she had visual proof that wasn't true. And someone had sent it to her deliberately. Back at the gym, the atmosphere was beginning to shift again. News of her victory hadn't died. If anything, it had gone digital. A short clip had surfaced, filmed by a student despite coach's strict no phones policy. It showed Maya's triangle choke in real time. No filter, no editing, just pure mechanics, clinical control, and a tap that came like a panic switch. The video had begun to circulate in local martial arts forums. Logan's name had been stripped from the title. The focus wasn't him, it was her. Speculation followed quickly. Anonymous users wondered aloud about her background. Was she ex-military, comp circuit, some kind of law enforcement? Her name didn't show up on any major jiu-jitsu records, but her timing, her posture, the surgical calm, it didn't belong to someone learning on the fly. By the third day, Coach Hawthorne was on edge. His greetings became shorter, his instruction colder. And Logan, still absent from class, had become the subject of murmured questions. Had he quit? Was he hiding? No one dared say it aloud, but the video had broken something. Not just his image, but the hierarchy of the gym. And Coach didn't like that. After class, Maya stayed late. She sat alone on the edge of the mat, hands wrapped, gaze unfocused. Riley approached again, more hesitant this time. "There's talk," she said softly. "Coach and Logan, they're not happy. He thinks you embarrassed him on purpose, that you came here to do it." Maya didn't look up. "I came to train." "I believe you," Riley said, "but I don't think that matters anymore." Later that night, a message appeared on Maya's phone. No number, just a text. "Spectre, you've been seen. Stop digging." The message sat on her screen like a dare. 5 words, no number. "Spectre, you've been seen. Stop digging." Maya stared at it for a full minute, then locked the phone, slid it face down on the counter, and walked to the kitchen without a sound. Her hands moved automatically, water on the stove, tea bag in the cup, back against the fridge while the flame hissed below the kettle. Her mind was elsewhere, not on the message, not on the threat, on the timing, the photo of her brother, the surfacing video, the growing friction at the gym, all of it converging now, as if someone had flipped a switch in a room she hadn't known still had power. Whoever had sent the message knew who she had been. Not Maya Cross, the quiet student trying to fade into civilian life. Spectre, the off-book operative who had buried more pasts than most people lived through. And they weren't warning her. They were testing her, reminding her that ghosts don't get to stay dead forever. The following morning, she arrived at Hawthorne BJJ early, before even Riley. The front door was unlocked, unusual. Maya stepped inside carefully, her senses adjusting immediately to the layout, the scent, the silence. The mat space was dim, untouched. But the office light was on. She crossed the mat slowly, stopping just short of the cracked door. Inside, Coach Hawthorne stood with his back turned, speaking low to someone on speakerphone. She couldn't hear the words, but the tone was clipped, defensive, urgent. The call ended. He turned, startled when he noticed her silhouette outside. His face tightened, then smoothed over. "You're early." She didn't move. Door was open. He nodded once. "Yeah, must have forgotten to lock it." But his eyes said something else. Not fear, not guilt, something closer to calculation. That night, she stayed parked outside the gym long after class ended, watching as the lights inside finally went dark. A black SUV pulled up minutes later. Out stepped a man she didn't recognize. Mid-50s, military bearing, wearing civilian clothes too deliberately plain. He didn't enter the gym. He knocked once. Coach opened the door immediately and let him in. They were inside for less than 5 minutes. Then the man left without speaking to anyone, disappearing down the main road like a shadow folding back into the landscape. The next morning, the gym felt different, colder, like the walls had absorbed something unspoken. Logan returned to class for the first time since the match. His face was unreadable, his behavior eerily restrained. No jokes, no bravado. He drilled silently, avoided Maya entirely, and left without showering. But the weight of his presence hung over the room like gunpowder in humid air. Something was being loaded, primed. Later that week, Maya received another envelope. This one mailed, postmarked from Tucson. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a folded map. The flash drive contained a brief encrypted video, surveillance footage dated 2019. Her brother, Nomad, moving through a hallway of what looked like a decommissioned bunker. He was walking alone, armed, alert, not a prisoner, not free either. The map had a red X marked near the New Mexico border, just inside a reservation territory known for restricted military testing grounds. Someone wanted her to see him, to come for him. But who? And why now? She brought the footage to the only person she trusted, Riley. They met off-site, in the back of a quiet cafe. Maya handed her a burner laptop with the video paused on her brother's face. "He's alive?" Riley asked. Maya nodded. "Supposed to have died in 2018. I buried an empty casket." Riley exhaled, slowly. "This doesn't look like a leak. It looks staged, like someone's leading you somewhere." "That's exactly what it is," Maya said. "But the message isn't the point. The senders are." Riley leaned in. "And who are they?" Maya hesitated. "People I used to work for. People who aren't supposed to exist anymore. If they're resurfacing, it's because something's going wrong." Later that night, her apartment building lost power for 12 minutes. When the lights returned, nothing appeared disturbed. No broken locks, no missing items. But Maya's instincts screamed otherwise. She checked her laptop's external ports. One had been accessed. A keylogger inserted. The screen had been cloned. She swept the system, wiped every trace, and packed her go bag in silence. The next morning, she didn't go to class. She didn't go to work. She went to the shooting range on the edge of town, using a false name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. There, she practiced movements not seen in sport. Close-quarter draws, silent reloads, escape sequences timed to under 5 seconds. When she left, the range owner asked if she was training for competition. She smiled. "Something like that." That evening, she called Riley and told her not to come to class. She told her to lock her doors, to use different routes home, to stop wearing the same damn jacket every morning. Riley didn't ask questions. She just said, "How bad is it?" Maya answered without hesitation. "It's starting." The compound sat alone in the desert, cloaked in the illusion of abandonment. From a satellite, it looked like a failed project, one of hundreds scattered across the Southwest, shuttered after Cold War budgets dried up. But Maya knew better. The gravel perimeter was swept regularly. The fencing, though rusted, still hummed faintly with live current. And the entrance, though partially buried, had fresh tire tracks curving away from it. She had studied the layout for days, cross-referenced old military grid data, even mapped possible exits based on airflow vents and emergency egress systems from similar structures. This place was a skeleton wearing the flesh of secrecy. And somewhere beneath that skeleton, her brother was still breathing. She approached just after dusk, when the shadows ran long but before the night's silence had fully taken hold. She moved on foot the last mile, dressed in non-reflective gear, body low, boots soundless on sand and stone. At the perimeter, she waited. 3 minutes. Then 7. Nothing moved. Not until a hatch hissed open in the base of a rocky hill and a single figure emerged. He wore no insignia, but his stance was unmistakable, trained, tense, scanning. Maya didn't hesitate. One fluid takedown, forearm press to carotid, a whisper. "I need your key card, and if you shout, I don't miss." The man complied. She bound his hands, tucked him against the ridge, and disappeared into the opening he'd exited. Inside, the air changed. It was cooler, sterile, like the breath of a machine. Concrete hallways stretched in tight angles, the lighting dim and yellowed. Cameras blinked in corners, but she knew the blind spots, the lag in cheap motion sensors. She had helped design better systems during the final years of her former life. Navigating the compound wasn't hard. It was the familiarity that unsettled her. The same humming doors, the same procedural signage, the same silence that was never truly silent. She passed a room with monitors showing infrared footage from above. Another with tagged profiles on corkboards, faces blurred, names abbreviated. Targets, operatives, ghosts. At the center of the compound was a command chamber, raised platform, surveillance feeds, strategically placed windows. And at the center of it all, behind thick bulletproof glass, was a holding cell. He was inside. Thinner, scruffier, but unmistakably him. Caleb Cross, her brother, nomad. She didn't move, not at first, just stood in the shadow of a steel doorway, watching him breathe, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate rhythm. When his eyes lifted toward the glass, there was no surprise, only recognition, as if he had known she would come, as if he'd been waiting. She moved fast after that, 2 guards between her and the cell, disabled in seconds. A wall panel exposed the manual override. She slid the glass open, and they stood face to face for the first time in 5 years. "You're late," he said, voice rough but alive. "You're not dead," she replied. He grinned, despite the swelling at his jaw. "We've both got some explaining to do." But time was short. Alarms blared within minutes. Footsteps echoed. Reinforcements moved through the halls with mechanical precision. She handed him a tactical knife, stripped from one of the guards, and together they cut through the back corridor toward the old emergency exit, the one she'd identified on the maps but had never confirmed. Along the way, Maya caught glimpses of files being loaded onto drives, command staff burning evidence, shredders chewing through reports. This wasn't just a facility. They were erasing it in real time. Whoever ran the place had a contingency plan. If Spectre ever returned, there would be nothing left to find. They reached the sub-level tunnel just as the lockdown doors sealed behind them. Gas hissed from somewhere. She didn't wait to identify it. 15 minutes later, they emerged through a rusted access hatch, half buried in the base of a dry canyon. Above them, the stars burned silently in the desert sky. Below, the compound was already beginning to burn. Someone had set charges, or perhaps she had interrupted an even deeper exit strategy. Either way, they didn't look back. 3 hours later, they reached the extraction point, a battered motel with a prepaid burner phone waiting behind the check-in counter, left by someone still loyal. Caleb collapsed onto the bed. Maya sat beside the window, watching headlights flash intermittently on the highway beyond. "They'll come after us," he said. She nodded. "They already are." "They're not going to stop." "No," she agreed, "but neither are we." For the first time in years, her old life and her new one had fused into something undeniable. She wasn't just training to escape. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't surviving. She was hunting. The next morning, she returned to the gym. It was nearly empty. Most students had left. Coach Hawthorne's name had been scrubbed from the registry. Riley now ran the classes. Cody helped with the youth program. No one said anything when Maya entered. They just made space. She stepped onto the mat barefoot, tied on her belt, no rank, no stripes, and took her place at the front. For a moment, there was silence. Then Riley bowed. The students followed. And something new began. Later that evening, another envelope arrived at the gym. No name, no return address. Inside was a photo. Maya and Caleb, together again. Below it, 3 words. "This isn't over." She stared at the image, then slipped it into her pocket without breaking stride. If they wanted a ghost, they'd get one. Spectre had risen,